Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sirius Report. My name is Ken Shorgen. I'm here with London Paul. And Paul, there's an interesting thing we can take a look at, and that's sort of the transition and growth of Chinese technology and the decline of innovation and technology in the West. Back in the day, and there was some absolute truth about it. The Chinese would take and reverse engineer and, for all intents and purposes, steal IP, steal technology, use it for themselves, and put it integrated into their society. But at a certain point, there was a change where there was an emphasis on engineering and colleges, and they saw so much of their brain drain go to the West, to the Berkeleys, to the Stanfords, to the MITs, and they were staying over there. Now that transition is going back, as at the same time that we see the West really stifling its own innovation and technology, first by exports, but then by doing certain regulatory things to destroy their own companies. Anyway, Paul, I want to thank you as always for being a part of the discussion. And there's a lot under this topic that we're going to try to get to today.
Yeah, and obviously, thank you for joining me too. Yeah, for sure. It's irrefutable. China did steal technology. Everybody knows it. Don't think in hindsight now, really, Chinese would deny it. But there's a lot of people in the West who still think China steals technology and it doesn't. And in recent years, and in very recent years, the last few years, China has started to steal a technological lead in many areas. And this is not just Chinese propaganda. There's reports written, white papers written in the West that acknowledge this and says, look, China's made huge technological progress in things like artificial intelligence, electronic chips, quantum computing, biotechnology, wireless green energy, and and genuinely so. And it's totally come about because the United States, in its infinite stupidity, decided to say, well, we know there's a tech revolution coming. We need to do something, excuse me, to stifle China's progress. So let's put embargoes on chip design or chipsets going to China. We're going to throttle their capability to gain an ascendancy in these fields. And China went, well, actually, we'll just develop our own chipsets. And they've made progress in 2 or 3 years the United States thought would take them 20 years. And recall, they tried to destroy Huawei and failed to succeed in doing that. So, it's the old saying, necessity is the mother of invention. And, the United States has accelerated that process because it isn't like China suddenly jumped on this 2 years ago. They're already making huge strides forward themselves and becoming what you might call a nation who was able to manufacture new technologies of the future. I mean, it invested hugely at school level in terms of trying to obviously get graduates in the so-called STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, maths, etc. And it's allocated huge financial resources for a long time to support innovation, inventions, technology development, and in the areas we've already highlighted. It's spent enormous sums of money on research and development. I mean, if you look at their annual expenditure, roughly speaking, it's been in recent years $400-500 billion equivalent. And each year it goes up maybe 5-10%, and it constitutes something like 3% of GDP. I mean, it invested hugely in digital infrastructure. So advanced technology, of course, needs that infrastructure to support it. And also, it completely changed the whole structure when we've talked about this of rotating its economy. So it became far more technologically driven, and it built this digital technology and economy. And really, this goes back probably not quite a decade, maybe 8-9 years ago. I mean, and if you just look at it from its infancy to what it is now, I mean, its digital economy has increased in probably in the last 8 years by, I would say, arguably in dollar terms, $5.5 trillion, and annual growth rates of 10, 12, 13, 14%. It's enormous. And it's probably, and these are just rough figures. They're not exactly accurate. I'm probably under quoting the figures. And of course, it wanted to have entrepreneurship, so encourage startups, pioneered kind of innovation, and it creates that environment to make it advantageous for all these tech startup companies to come into existence. And they've got hundreds and hundreds of these companies, and dozens of companies are added every single year. And and the list goes on. I mean, and we talk about the green revolution and the disaster it is in the West. Well, their green revolution actually has been pretty successful because they haven't done it to the detriment of fossil fuel industry, etc. And they've done it in a calm, measured way. And they've built wind farms where they can build wind farms. Now, I'm not saying I'm an advocate for this, but just trying to explain from their perspective what they've done. The same with these enormous solar farms. And of course, that this huge rotation in their economy is just not being understood. The West thinks, therefore, in its infinite stupidity, that, well, we'll just throttle China's economy, we'll stop their imports and it'll kill them as a nation, thinking China's still dependent on the old model of manufacturing cheap goods and shipping them to the West. Well, they still do that, but increasingly less so, because some of that market's been shipped out to other countries like Vietnam, and they've rotated their economy, and it's more high-end and high-tech manufacturing and advanced technologies in manufacturing and using e-commerce, etc., etc. So you get the understanding in a broad sense why they've made these big advancements and why, it was inevitable that China was going to suddenly become the technological lead in the world, and people will in the West will just not be able to either accept that or believe it, but it's absolutely true. And just go to China and look also at all the laboratories they've created for looking at artificial intelligence in IT and biotechnology and space travel, and the list goes on and on. They've invested enormously, because there is a big tech revolution coming, and what are we doing in the West? Frankly, very little.
Yeah, exactly. And, something I mentioned before, there's really only one individual standing out who is trying to raise the bar in this innovation and technology war, and that's Elon Musk. There was a story that came out today. French media blames SpaceX for 2,500 Airbus layoffs. Okay, well, what is stopping Airbus? What is stopping the Boeings of the world? What is stopping all of these companies that already have a foundation for technology from doing that innovation and moving forward? Well, it's the problem of why it's being stifled in the West: regulations. There is, whether it's the state, California pulls out and says they don't want Musk doing any more launches from the coast. We have in Europe where they're pretty much putting sanctions and suing and liability everybody. And in the end, the West is its own worst enemy, because you would you would think that they want to compete against China rather than keep them from winning. And that's the mentality. We can't compete, so we're going to do everything impossible to keep you from winning. We're going to put exports on your electric cars, despite the fact they've been pushing this Green New Deal garbage for so long. You would think that, oh my gosh, we have the capacity to bring in inexpensive, well-built, well-manufactured electrical cars that people want and can afford. And no, we're not going to do it. We're going to force them to do these high-priced ones they can't afford, they don't want. And then when nobody buys them, it's just going to be an absolute wasted amount of money. plus the fact that China has been, people wonder, well, why are they doing all of this? They have access to coal. Why are they doing all these electric solar plants? Why are they looking at alternative energy? It's because they understand the need for massive amounts of energy in the new technological future. Take a look at what Amazon is doing. Amazon now is looking to purchase many nuclear facilities to be able to power their future and their business. Why? Because the United States has refused to update and fix the grid. They are cutting off access to cheap energy like oil, natural gas, and coal. They are wasting so much money on garbage for their ideological, Green New Deal. And so everything that could potentially lead the United States towards being equal, if not competing in the technological future, is being stifled both in the United States and Europe. And the companies that are already founded, already have the R&D facilities to be able to do this, are for many, if they're not going bankrupt, they're not able to focus any capital towards creation this. The only reason NVIDIA has become what it is because the US government put $1.6 trillion into the CHIPS Act. They've been subsidized. They didn't actually innovate this stuff. They probably, brought in their HB1 Chinese and Indian engineers, and they help create this stuff. Well, guess what? As China becomes the technological leader, then those scientists that previously for the past 2 decades have been coming to America, they're going to stay at home, and they're going to be building the future in the global South, while the US, which has absolutely zero in relation to college degrees coming out of universities these days, they have no engineers. As a matter of fact, one of the big things that was tied to the Ukraine conflict is they were unable to create enough missiles, weapons, and other things for the war because most of the engineers who had the knowledge to do it have already retired, and they had to beg and bring them out of retirement to be able to train the new class to be able to work them on the assembly line. So we don't have the engineers, we don't have the workers. And once we lose those coming over from India and China, once they stay at home, it's over.
Yeah, I mean, these are huge risks, and we should have been aware of this. And again, it's this spectacular failure to understand as well that in all these attempts to stifle China's capabilities, we forgot that we're dependent on the Chinese and the Russians for raw materials to make, like, gallium and germanium, to make semiconductor chips. I mean, so China puts an embargo on those, then the West is in big trouble as well. And also, in terms of chips, just go into a little bit of detail just to put some context in this. But recently, China achieved this milestone in the development of what are called silicon photonics. They're basically an advanced alternative to semiconductor chips. Now, they obviously are manufactured entirely different. I'm not going to go into the physics of it because either it'll bore people or they won't understand what it means. But certainly, if you look, major players in the global semiconductor sectors have been putting quite a lot of resources in trying to develop silicon photonics because there's a genuine belief, and it's correct, I think, that you can make better chips in the future for data and graphics processing, AI. Okay, there are definitely challenges in translating these breakthroughs into commercial products, but we know, for example, NVIDIA's working on this, Intel's working on this, Huawei's working on this. They're looking at silicon photonics, and the global market for this is expected to obviously continue to grow. Okay, to what extent, it's a bit questionable at this point in time, but their thing, they can be, once you've mastered photonics, they can be produced domestically using raw materials and equipment, but here's the important part, without relying on the high-end lithography machines, unlike semiconductor chips. So we need these high-end EUV machines, as they're called, required for manufacturing advanced chips. We're often seeing, well, and this is why they put this enormous pressure on ASML to not provide China with the most advanced technology, because they thought we can stifle China's semiconductor industry in the process. So China went, well, okay, we'll get around that at the lower end. But by the way, we're looking at photonics. Maybe in the future, we won't even need these EUV machines. So it's rapidly now trying to establish itself as a dominant player in that industry. I mean, and they've certainly opening up facilities all across China. And who's to say very rapidly they might be able to dominate a sector? And it's not, where they can increase massively also production capacity, but it enhanced their technological innovation and advancement. So these implications in its early days could be immense, because it would then not have to rely so much on traditional semiconductor technology. I mean, and they certainly are, these silicon photonics. They're going to revolutionize electronics, because they'll have applications, what a surprise, in electric vehicles, in 5G, 6G technology, renewable energy systems. They offer far higher efficiency. They have better thermal management compared to traditional silicon chips. There's an example where if you cut them off, in the end, you're going to, from traditional semiconductor and these lithography machines, you're going to damage the likes of ASML in the future, as one example. And they're already, I think, very concerned about this. But you're also just saying, well, we've got the resources for all the reasons we said. We've got the desire. We're going to back it with finance and the innovation. We have the people to design these new technologies, and we're going to do this. And it's very hard to bet against China succeeding in that regard.
No, absolutely. Anyway, any other final comments?
Yeah, just a brief point. I mean, this is something that came out, and this is another example. You talk about revolutionizing the tech sector. Okay, again, this is early days, but how quickly does something that comes out early become established? I mean, if China can do things in a few years that the US thought could take 20 years, don't rule out this development, where basically Chinese researchers have used this quantum computer, and they said they've managed to execute the first successful quantum attack on widely used encryption algorithms. That therefore poses, okay, not yet, but it's the first stepping stone, what you might term a significant threat to sectors like finance, the military, intelligence, anywhere where you're trying to obviously hide and secure, highly sensitive information. So what the claim is, they've breached these particular algorithms. They've not yet cracked specific passcodes. So while a quantum computer's not yet revealed these passcodes used in the algorithms test, it's obviously closer than anything that's been previously achieved in this sector. So therefore, the argument is, as the technology advances, they could yield far more significant and dangerous quantum attacks. I mean, and this, therefore, if quantum computing comes into existence, the existing cryptography systems could arguably be just rendered obsolete when that happens, because one day it's going to happen. And it's the end of everything in regards to the technology for security, whatever it might be, banking, I say the military, intelligence agency, the list goes on and on. Then everything's vulnerable. And again, China is making advancements in this. Now, I'm not saying there aren't also studies going on across the West and in the United States, but you generally always hear it's China making technological advancement, whether it's the simple things like electric vehicles and taking dominant positions globally within the space of a couple of years, or in this case, far more sort of high-end quantum computing, which is in no way, shape, or form near the point where it becomes a systemic threat for all the reasons we've just highlighted. But again, it's like also the silicon photonics. It's the same principle. And the West is being left behind, and China is leading this technological revolution. And we can pretend it's not true, but it's reality.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, especially if they continue the way they're going with quantum computing, that within the next 5-10 years, all of a sudden, oh, look, China has achieved cold fusion. And when that happens, the entire jig is up.
Yeah,
Anyway,
absolutely. And a very excellent point to finish on.
Yeah. Anyway, Paul, I want to thank you as always for being a part of this great discussion.
And likewise.
And to everybody here at the Sirius Report community, thank you for being a part of it as well. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, comment, send this out to anybody you think would be important. And until the next time we get together, have a great day.